A very good morning to all of you. Um, I am Ayushi Garg from Amity School of Languages, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow campus. And I have the pleasure and honor to introduce to you our guest speaker for the day, Ivan Sanjeev Lazar. But before that, I would like to talk about Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray, who's the head of our department. And she's been handling it for more than 20 years now. So, Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray, a distinguished academician in the Department of English at Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow, specializes in English literature, professional and technical communication, and professional development skills. She is recognized for her innovative teaching methods and has mentored numerous students guiding their research and academic pursuits. Dr. Ray's scholarly work includes articles and papers published in national and international journals, and she actively participates in conferences and seminars. An accomplished author of 8 books on literary studies, she is dedicated to Indian knowledge systems and the Viksit Bharat campaign. She is also the head of the Center of Excellence of Indian Knowledge Systems in Amity School of Languages. She received the International Excellence Award in 2023 and 24 for her contributions to poetry and holds the Royal Golden Fellow membership from the Eudoxia Research Center, USA. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, for the introduction of the guest speaker, going primarily by the stage and academic name of Ivan Sanjeev, a learner and practitioner of theater, film, television, and interactive media, Ivan is an independent lecturer by profession. He takes great joy in creating film and stage narratives and has found even greater fulfillment teaching theater, film, and ludonarrative aesthetics for the past 8 years across India, with occasional experiences abroad. Having interviewed popular British playwright Simon Stephens and theatre companies across the UK, such as Imitating the Dog Theatre Company and Frantic Assembly, and having worked on university based productions of plays by the late Girish Karnad, Ivan is passionate about being part of stories that span across cultures and paradigms. A graduate in theatre making from the University of York, Northshire, UK, Ivan is continually challenging existing theatrical and media related practices. Devoting his life to stories across diverse cultures and world literatures, Ivan is currently pursuing a professional doctorate in educational practices to uphold and deepen his passion for storytelling at a grassroots level. We welcome you, Ivan. Now, I'll just give you all an informal introduction to our guest speaker because he has been my classmate at Christ University when we were studying Masters in English and Communication Studies back in 2016. So we also have another classmate here, Pratiksha. Thank you for joining. So during our time at Christ, we often met after classes offline in the Freshit or the Gourmet, discussing and debating art and philosophy with our favorite professors. Professionally, one of the highlights for me was having the golden opportunity to play a double role in a creative adaptation of Girish Karnad's celebrated drama Fire and the Rain. It was beautifully directed by Ivan, and it was then that I truly recognized his extraordinary passion for theatre. I've admired Ivan's immense knowledge and dedication ever since, and I'm honored to introduce him today. Pratiksha is also here in the meeting with us, and she had also played a crucial role in the play. It was also that we had the same guide, Professor Meenakshi Shivram, who coincidentally spoke here at Amity School of Languages last April. What keeps Ivan and I connected even after more than 6 years since we left Christ is our shared love for art, film, theater, creativity, subjectivity, Kantian aesthetics, deconstructionist sensibility, not to mention our recently discovered similar interests of neuroaesthetics and self-referentiality. To put it more simply, the joy we find in interacting with each other and fellow artists and scholars of theater. So I would like to thank again Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray for facilitating this lecture and being the chief patron. Now, the purpose and significance of the guest lecture is that, we have so many classes and lectures in the university, but learning from a practitioner means immersing oneself in the current real world aspects of the discipline. This approach enables one to explore arenas beyond the boundaries of textbooks and university curricula, which I personally find sometimes restrictive. And thus, it helps bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise. Before the talk, we would also like to give you a set of disclaimers. So this is not a beginner's talk. It's not a beginner's guide to acting or directing, either performative or written. The talk will mostly be restricted to visual, technical, performative, and aesthetic dimensions of theater. It will not indulge in any social, cultural, ethical, or political commentary on any specific film or drama. There is no claim about the authenticity of the information presented here because it's mostly a kind of a critical and a creative evaluation. It will not follow the methodical approach that is typically expected of research publications or dissertation and thesis defenses at universities. And the talk will also not demonstrate the application of a literary theory to a specific film or drama. The talk will mostly be deconstructive, and the participants are assumed to have a bit of knowledge about, a basic understanding of theater and a fair idea of theories like post-structuralism, postmodernism, and post-humanism. So we have Bhavya, who's joined from Lucknow University. She is my dear friend, and she is doing her PhD on post-humanism. So all of these are upcoming areas, and many of you have shared in the Google form that we floated earlier that you're interested in, the shocking title that we have. So with this, I'll just stop and ask Ivan to share his screen. Thank you, Ivan, for joining in, and please start.
Thank you once again for this great honor and divine pleasure, if I may say so, because in all my years of interacting with theater, interacting with cinema, interacting with the performance arts, the greatest joy that I personally find myself in is when I get to, do these kind of sessions across university campuses. So my friends, when we make a film or when we do theater practices, they always want to know what my department is, because there's always a pre-production department. There is the art department, there are the actors, there is the director. So at what point do you come in is the most flouted question to me. So I say, I come in when most of your work is done. Maybe in 10 years' time, someone will talk about your film. Someone will coin words like pan-Indian. Someone will come across, layers like multidisciplinary work of art. That would be our job. I would be researching on your work. I would keep the memory of you alive across university campuses worldwide. And if possible, when I do films, when I practice what I preach in a way, I get to take the feedback from the existing students all across the world. Thereby, it will be an interplay, an exchange of information across generations when people who practice and people who teach have a very organic relationship. This is exactly the reason why I love coming across university campuses and sharing what little I've accumulated over the years. And as Ms. Ayushi has pointed out, Dr. Ayushi has pointed out, this is all on-site lived-in experiences, which can be contradicted, which can be disagreed with. And I personally welcome every disagreements out there that I can gather because that keeps the momentum going. Okay, so having said that, a little bit about me. Usually, this is kind of like one of my, kind of like nightmares that I have because I don't like talking about myself. The projects that I've worked with, the greatest memory I have is of working with late Girish Karnad. So before we could decide on Agnimathumale, The Fire and the Rain, where you've encountered two legendary actresses who are sharing the frame with me right here. Okay, so they get the joke. Anyway, so before I did that, I worked on another play, Nagamandala. Okay, and Girish Karnad, please be on his name, he has written two endings for that play. Dissatisfied with both endings, I had written to him asking, can I write a third ending? Okay. He said, as long as you do it on university campuses, go for it. But we couldn't do that play, and we ended up doing Agnimathumale instead. And after doing that play, I realized the dramatic conventions that we have in our country, okay, when it comes to devising a play, when it comes to acting, when it comes to directing, when it comes to perceiving, and as to how the play lives years later, I'm still yet to find a rival for it abroad. Okay. So today, there will be a major issue when it comes to some topics that we will cover. There will be a clear-cut East-West versus West kind of a discussion that will arise. There will be people who prefer one side to another. There will be people who prefer many genre conventions. There will be people who say my kind of theater is better than your kind of theater, and I happen to fall into one of those groups. Uh, Majorly because when we execute storytelling theatrically, it is different from executing stories on screen. It's different from executing stories in real life. So let me just share my screen with you and we'll get started right away. Just bear with me for a minute, please. Is this visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Ivan, go ahead.
Okay. So before we begin any further, okay. So these lines are from a work that is very personal to me. There seemed to be a problem. Just a minute, please.
Do you want me to share the screen, Ivan?
Okay, I got it. So before we begin, I would like to, if possible, see the people I'm talking with, because this brings me back to that time when I was teaching at a school. How many of you are actually here? I would just like to take a look, if it's okay.
Yeah, participants, please turn your cameras on. It would be helpful.
Yeah, I was dreading to say that word.
Mhm.
Flashback memories of school days. We can wait another 2 minutes, no problem.
Students, please turn your camera on. Ria, Devshi, Ayush, Arya. Hello, Aradhana.
Hi Ayushi, how are you?
Okay, it's good to see all of you here.
Mhm.
Finally, we're going to talk about something called presence, Presence, a very important term for students of theater, practitioners of theater. An AI takeover of the world has already begun. So let's see the people first, and then we will go into greater detail. Dr. Aishi, I forwarded you the WhatsApp message regarding the PPT in case there's a technical glitch from my end. Please do check.
All right, no problem. Okay.
Okay, so now I think we can begin.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, that
Okay,
was some
Dr. Aishi, if I may
disturbance.
make a request. No
Yeah,
problem. If I may make a request, can you open the PPT from your end so that
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
can
I'll just
see
share
it?
it. Just a sec.
I apologize for the technical glitch.
No, no, it's totally fine. I'll just share it. Give me a moment.
And no need to apologize. That's where machines are not as smooth as human beings.
That is unfortunately true. In another
Yes,
century, perhaps.
yes, exactly.
Thank you. In the meantime, does anybody want to tell me exactly how you came to like theater, how you came to like storytelling? Anyone confident enough to take the flames and come on camera and tell them their greatest passionate secret out here? That is how you differentiate the warriors from the rest of the crowd. Anyone willing?
Well, well, if you give me a time, and since now with 7 decades of my life, the Hindi term kissa goi and storytelling is an Indian tradition because orality has been our Indian ancient part of our ancient Indian knowledge is being forwarded through orality and the tradition of storytelling. As a young girl, I was brought up in a convent which was very, very aesthetic, and the Irish nuns were Catholics, and it was, we had to learn catechism, we learned to go to the church to be a part of the mass. And at home, my mother was extremely Hindu. So the stories that I heard from my grandmother, my mother, were from oral traditions of the past. And it was an amalgamation of what the West was preaching and what our traditions were talking about. As a child, I was very confused, but certain things I realized were common to both. There was a lot of, you know, complexities in the stories that my mother told, and I would ask my mother, how can Ram be such a big? You tell me that he is a hero. All men should be like him. Yet he left his wife, and he never brought up his children. And she would tell me that's one aspect and things like that. Whereas when I followed the Catholic traditions of monogamy, I said, well, that is common. Monogamy in Ram and no divorce among the Catholics. But then as I grew up, the stories that I had heard in my childhood brought fresh perspectives at all ages. As a teenager, the perspective was very different. And today, the perspectives are more metaphysical than physical and, the interest of hearing stories only. So I feel that storytelling is a very important component from where, from infancy to adult age, you learn so many things. And also, as you grow old and as a teenager, you look at things differently. When, as you grow old and you start seeing the world around, experiencing so many things, it dawns on you that nothing matters in the world. No money, no material goods, nothing, but it's your connect with divinity, with nature. And then you start reflecting on these traditional stories in the context of these things, and you find greater meanings.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. I think there's
Is
some
there a network
disturbance
issue?
at ma'am's end.
That is what my feeling is. I feel they must be for one child, which is now like living in, single families rather than joint families or grandparents living with them. So the children are missing out on that aspect, which is a very a great contribution to the solid foundations of morals, aesthetics, and thought process of any child. So, Yvonne, I told you my own reflection.
Indeed, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there were so many layers to that topic alone. You covered it from a cultural point of view, socio-political point of view, and even from an interpersonal point of view. So I think, yeah, you've actually covered up what we wanted to speak today, Dr. Wade. Thank you so much for that. We would be talking about layers. So starting with, let's just go to the first slide, please. If it were up to me, I would have loved to hear from each and every one of you as to how you encountered storytelling. But I will see if I can, in a way, speak what is already there in your mind, so that any questions that you might have within, if I could answer it some way, we can agree on that, I think. So we'll start with the title, The Death of the Theatrical, Design versus Dialogue. Dr. Aishi here can vouch for the duality system of arguments. There's always like two sides clashing, right? So we're going to talk about when people usually watch theater. Okay, we're going to first primarily talk about how do people make sense of theater. Okay? When someone says, I didn't get it, okay, I didn't understand it, I think it's too hi-fi, I think it's too intellectual. Even the word art house, I personally think art house is another form of commercial venture. There is a great audience to it. And then this image that you see here, can any of you point out what it is that this is from a play production called Arvopat, which is a composer's name. This is an operatic format, but just forget all of that. Just tell me what it is that you see here. Anybody?
It looks like a soliloquy.
Oh my God, that was like, why would you say that? That's amazing. Tell me more. Why did you say soliloquy? That's
Because in
great.
that stage, there is one person who's trying to act.
Okay.
A whole screen shows a single person. So might be he have many things to express to the audience. So it clearly looks like a soliloquy.
Okay, interesting. Anything more to add?
Uh, Nothing more than that. I'll just
Nothing?
stay with.
Okay. This is Anshia, right? Am I telling your name right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Anshia. You have successfully dabbled in a thematic reading of a scene. What does a scene represent? As in, what does a scene mean based on what it is that we can see and what it is that we can infer? Okay. You saw a lone man, correct?
Yeah.
Highlighted against this big, immense stage. Okay, that is a thematical reading. Thank you for that. Is there another way we can read this scene, emphasizing on the word read? Anything else that stands out? Something is highlighted here. Something is focused here. Something is shown here. Something is hidden here. Something is shrouded here. All these things are working together in harmony. So what is it that is highlighted visually? I apologize for people who need more layers to see, because some people, they need more color. Okay, I'm not judging anybody for that. My granny is in this conversation, by the way. Whatever I show her, she goes, I can't see anything. What is this? So I apologize for that in advance. But anyway, how many of you can actually see a major thing? It is right across your vision. It is very closely related to theater. I'll give you a clue. It is a place where theater happens. I've said the answer.
The
Stage.
stage, Ivan.
Correct. This stage. Does this look like any common stage that you've seen before? So we'll start with that. Where theater happens, the stage. Okay. So usually you've seen stages as polygonal, rectangular, small circle. The shape of a stage is important to the show that is going to happen. Correct? With me so far? Or if you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have so many types of stages. We have so many, actually 5 types of stages, but people improvise it later on. We have a rectangular proscenium stage, polygonal shape, parallelogram shape, stages with allocated back spaces, allocated mid spaces, and front spaces. Then we have something called theater in the round, where the actor sits at the very center, has to face the audience at the same time in tandem. Then we have the three-sided theater. The back of the actor, there will be no one. 3 sides, a peninsular kind of theater. Then we have a promenade sort of theater, which is like a ramp. Okay, almost like the fashion show ramp used by models. Then we have stages that don't even exist conventionally. We have plays that happen in the woods. We have plays that happen in abandoned railway stations. We have plays that happen in derelict houses. And as new kind of performance happens, new kind of words come into play. Immersive theater, interactive theater, physical theater. So these are some of the offshoots of innovations and practices that occur when many people interact and make theater their own. And that is where theater dies. And I'll tell you why. So far, this is what we would call a promenade theater and a proscenium stage on one. Where the person stands, that can be called a conventional stage. And that long rectangular ramp at the beginning, which almost looks like a crucifix, like a big cross beam, that is where the show ends. Okay, this is our part by Robert Wilson. We were talking about commercial theater, art theater. Robert Wilson, unfortunately, I did my dissertation on him. I would not recommend it to anyone because this great author has no idea what he himself is doing because he thinks theater should not be defined. So how can we define it better? So Robert Wilson takes place for 6 hours. 6 hours is a minimum duration of a Robert Wilson play. A character might walk from one part of the stage to the other, and that itself will take 45 minutes. Let that sink in for just a little bit. There are no dialogues per se, but there is heavy sound design, heavy stage design. There is music playing throughout. It puts you in a trance. So by the time the character crosses one end of the stage to the other, the viewers who are watching it, they themselves are half asleep. They themselves don't know if they're dreaming, if they're sleeping, if they're somewhere in between. You cannot watch a Robert Wilson play. You experience it with your senses. And after the experience is done, after the 6 hours is done, when you come out into the sunlight and when you look at the people next to you, you feel something has changed. But if I then ask you, describe to me what it is that you've seen, you won't be able to. You just go like, oh, I don't know what it is that I saw. It was something grand and something immense. So how do people like that make sense of theater? So this is what we will be talking about today. Okay. The death of the theatrical, design versus dialogue. How do we make sense of theater? How many ways of doing theater are there? Which version of making sense is the established one? All these questions will be asked. Is it clear so far? Are you guys with me? Any questions to ask? Any terminology that is unclear? Anybody?
So you've mentioned about the design of the stage.
Yes,
Uh,
Anshu.
means as a cross. And what do you mean by that? It's like end of the drama or
So for this production, you need to like understand how the story is related to the stage design. That is the first thing. So the Christian symbolism is a very important element in this play. It's about a son wanting to ask forgiveness for his father. And towards the end of our talk, I will show you the rest of what happened here on the stage. Okay, it is there on YouTube, but be warned, I would not recommend this to anybody who is not an advanced pursuer of theater. If you're just starting and experimenting with theater in the initial stages, maybe stay away from it for now. I've been talking to Dr. Ayushi saying we should have a separate session on this whole thing. It would be very dense, but for now, to answer your question, the story and the design is closely interrelated for this production. That is why the stage looks like a spiritual crucifix kind of a design. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Okay,
Ivan,
thank
I
you.
have a question.
Yes, doctor.
Yes.
Oh, somebody else
Yes,
was
is
talking,
that
I think.
sure?
So can I ask one question, sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah, please.
Who might talk?
Yeah.
Shashank, right?
I have Shank here. So I have this small query regarding the topic that the death of the theatrical. You have mentioned the death of the theatrical. Why it's not theater? It's theatrical there.
Very good question. Very good question. So thank you for raising that up, Shashank. So the theater is something that is a medium. Okay. Theatricalism, theatricality, these are things that can happen outside the medium. Okay. There is very much a comparison that exists in all of us when we ask questions like, how realistic is this? Is it real? You know, when we encounter movies, when we encounter computer graphics, for all those gamers in the house, please make a noise or something. I need to see where you are. You're all hiding here. Do not say PUBG and Fortnite. I beg you. Please don't say that. If you're following gaming news, you will see that new technologies create so many things from scratch. We are doing graphics on the human skin. We are doing graphics on mocap. We're doing graphical storytelling. So there is this obsession for the technological industry to make something as realistic as possible, as real as possible. So the reason why I chose the topic, the death of the theatrical, is to identify a series of problems that I've been seeing for the last 10 years or so in the theater, which is this over-reliance on dialogue. Okay. So this session, we are going to look at when people watch plays, what they're actually doing is watching people talk to each other. Okay. Most of the contemporary Indian theaters out there, it's all a dinner table conversation. It is all people talking. It's about college students talking. It's about lovers talking. It's about parental conflicts talking. It's all talking and talking and talking. That makes a scene realistic. But is it truly theatrical if it is realistic? Should theatrical only happen in the theater? What about in movies? So what makes theater theater? What makes a film a film? What makes a game a game? What makes a painting a painting? This is what we call medium specificity. Can the theatrical leap across all mediums? Is it something that can only be found in the theater realm? So to answer your question, Shashank, the theater is a strictly medium related one. Theatrical is happening right now, even as we speak. But that exactly is what is going to slowly die, a slow and gradual process. That I will reveal towards the end of the session. Okay. Is it clear, Shashank?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next slide, please, Dr. Aish. You had a question?
It's okay. It's okay. We can take it later.
Yeah, sure. So when people ask me, how do I make theater? What is the secret formula for writing theater stories? You might have heard this statement, which says that the most personal is the most creative. I'm going to say that again. The most personal is the most creative. Things that matter to you, the things that matter to your identity, the things that matter to your situation, to your family, to your enemies, to your rivals, to your loved ones, the things that make you who you are, the things that define you. This is where you should borrow your stories from, is what they say. You should be able to relate to things, is what they say. You should be able to connect to the audience, is what they say, not me. I say, don't do any of that. Because theater, at the end of the day, is a visual medium. What you see should invite you in for an experience, not what you hear. If you're just going to watch a movie, or if you're just going to watch a theater show, it has to be different from when you're opposed to just hearing something on Spotify, hearing something on, for our older generations, on the radio. How many of you here have opened a track and have let your mind wander? The music is completely taking you over. The music is completely guiding you over, almost waltzing with you in your imagination, and you're like creating these magnificent visuals out there. Many of you have done it, if I'm guessing it right. Anybody? No. So that is the primary essence of the theatrical. The fact that you should be able to imagine what you want to imagine. And the fact that what you imagine can be accommodated visually into the design of the theater. That is the first step. So to do that, these are the four elements that makes a theatrical production successful. It can be summarized as light, shadow, movement, and music. Movement can be the choreographed movement of the actors, the syncopated choreography of the lighting that determines how the actor moves, as you can see in this picture itself. Okay. This is a domestic setup. It is a play by Arthur Miller. And all the pictures that you see in this presentation, I've spoken to the people behind it, and I was in the audience looking at the actors and all. Okay. So this picture in front of you, this is a scene that happens in a domestic setup, in a family. It is a scene, as you can see, where there is conflict. But how is that conflict shown? How is that conflict highlighted? Some would even dare call this scene a violent scene. If so, what makes this scene violent? Anybody would like to add on to this? Anybody?
If I may speak,
Yes.
I think you asked a question about how it is highlighted. I see that it's highlighted using lights because everything else is dark and the focus is solely on the four characters that are there. About violence, I'm not sure.
Okay. Just to give a counter question back, is the focus on the four characters or on the two characters?
Okay, mainly on the two characters, but
Okay.
then the audience also knows that the two more characters, third and fourth one, are also present.
Present, right?
Maybe they are the audience in the scene.
Oh, that's also an interesting viewpoint. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Another person? Yes, please. Oh, this was Miss Pratiksha. This is Miss Indulekha. Tell me.
What I think is the way the person begs to the person, that the person who is highlighted is the person who's uh, is on the knees begging, and that is the person who is highlighted. And it shows that something is being, violence is being done on him, that he is begging for mercy. That is what I feel. I don't
Okay.
know.
This is a good interpretation. I absolutely agree with this. I want you to remark on something else, Ms. Indulege, if I may ask. Can you tell me about the direction in which these people are looking? All four characters, they're looking places. Their eyes are going somewhere. The arc. Where exactly are they looking in the scene? Can you comment on that, if I may ask?
We have two of them, nice.
Um, I'm sorry, there's been a network issue. Can you hear me? Hello?
Beg your pardon?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Ashi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. Ms. Indulekha, I think there's some technical issue at your end. Your voice is not clearly audible.
Okay, no matter. Ms. Indulekha, can you hear me? No matter. So I think what I meant to say was the character at the top, at the extreme left, he's the narrator of the story. Okay. These two characters right at the center, the third character is the villain of the story. Okay. The fourth character is the empathetic lady who belongs to a different family. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So this whole shot, even though it happens on stage, the camera is the one that records the whole thing. So if the camera is in the center, and if it is wide lensed like this is what we call a theatrical frame. There is a constant relation between latest technology practices and theater. So we can actually appreciate this theatrical shot primarily because the camera captured in this way from the center. So the actors, what they did, they plotted their movements precisely. As the light changes, the guy begs, he falls on his knees. This villain character leans forward, grasps him by the shoulder. And to balance that intensity, we have a character on the left, the narrator, who doesn't feel anything. He's not even looking at them. To add some empathy to the scene, we have the fourth character, the lady, who is looking at them from a distance. So this is how we create layers for a scene. And the light and shadow, the design elements, highlight the intensity. So all these elements in tandem harmonizes. And then, and only then, should the dialogue come forward. So what I'm trying to say is dialogue is a secondary feature for drama. That is a sacrilegious statement to make because people believe that dialogue and theater are closely interlinked. But I say the dialogue is a secondary feature that comes in after the visual palette is set. Light, shadow, movement, and music. And this creates a theatrical phenomena. This word is very important. Theatrical phenomena. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. How do you make sense of theater? This topic we've already covered before. If you're looking at this scene, far too many actors. Earlier, we saw that the person standing on the center is the one that is highlighted. What about in this scene? Where is the center? As the great Derrida had asked, where is the center? Does the center always make sense? What do you see? Anybody feel like commenting on this? How many characters are important here in a way? How many characters are the ones that capture our gaze in this scene? And something that I do, I mean, I love this, Penny. So I asked it, how did you conceive of a verticality in the stage? This is a very important point. Usually, if this frame is the stage, where my hands are, this is where the actors are. All action happens here. Okay. The brilliance of this stage design, I put a title there because there's a comment. I had to cover that out, to be honest. So the highlight of this setting is the fact that there is a huge staircase at the behind, and there are people there. So to give you more context, this is a tenement building near the docks, okay, where the wharves, where the sailors gather, in an old part of New York, a disheveled place, lower middle class and even lower class people live there, according to the script. So we have people commenting on this scene from this staircase up top. So if the actors are here, we have more people here looking down, coming down the stairs, throwing things from the top. So there's a proper verticality to this scene. How many plays have you seen from your own life where a verticality was made use of? All action happens here. So for me, in this scene, what actually happens is no characters are saying anything. They're just yelling things out. There's a crowd going, people are commenting from up above. And amidst all that, the villain slowly emerges the scene. The villain is right at the extreme right, the long-haired man. And is in the extreme, the guy who's leaning to his left. And the peace between the two factions, the two people. The rest are all pedestrians. You see what I'm trying to say when I spoke of the earlier elements: light, shadow, movement, and music. The music part was absent in this scene because the director interpreted it that way. So this is how you create a layer. Does anybody else want to add to this? Anybody? Any comments? So this is how you devise and plot. If you get something on a page that says, the hero walks across the villain in a crowded tenement building, the best way to do it is, how do I highlight who's the hero and who's the villain? How do I show it as a tenement building? In classical theater, the hero just walks forward and he says, behold this tenement building, behold the crowds. In front of them all, I challenge you, my enemy, to meet me upon the battlefield, for we may settle this like adversaries. He might say a line like that, and the audience is going to understand that this is how it is. But this being a modernist play, it's View from the A View Under the Bridge by Arthur Miller. That's the name of the play. We see things are much more realistic because that is the tradition of the play. Even so, when a team plots what is there on the script to the stage, you have to think of stage positionalities. Anything else? Anybody else want to comment? Anybody? Okay, we can move to the third slide. Now, this is one of my favorite aspects for theater. How important is an emotional impact? Should emotional impact be the be-all and the end-all of all theater productions? As I said earlier, they say you should relate to your characters. I say no. That is a secondary process. Primarily, there's something else. But what do you think? How important is an emotional process? And to ask the question that I put in this slide, is emotion a process or a result of excellent performance? Should emotional impact come only at the end? Or should it come at the beginning? Or should it stay throughout? Or are there intensities of it? What do you think?
I think it will vary depending on who's the director and what is his vision. So
Yes,
Brechtian,
thank you, Dr. Gordon.
if somebody who is doing a Brechtian drama or following the epic theater will not focus on emotion, but rather some person who is driven into emotional idea will always look for emotion and as the core of the performance, which will lead to catharsis of the audience.
It's a brilliant answer, Dr. Rohit, correct? Thank you for the terminology,
Yes.
driven into emotion. I really love that. Okay. Do you want to tell me a bit more about that? Driven
About,
into emotion. When you use the
sorry,
terminology, driven into emotion.
uh, driven into emotion means driven in the emotion. That is what you're asking, right?
Yes.
Driven into emotion is like there are playwrights, and I think theater is very cultural, and it originates from the culture. So driven into emotion means uh, something which will make audience feel um, that connect which actor is or the group of actors on stage are going through, and they will develop empathy, or they might feel sympathy, or they might get angry at a certain scene which is happening. So there are playwrights, there are theater directors who are very much charged with bringing up this emotional outpouring on the stage, whereas there are playwrights who are completely against this idea, and they want to they believe that the message goes away, the idea goes away if we make audience emotionally charged with a beautiful example is the Mother Courage, where when Weigel, Brecht's wife, did a production in Berlin Ensemble. She did a scene where the daughter dies, and it made audience feel emotional. And Brecht was not happy with it, and he was not very happy. And then he said, and he redirected, and he redirected the blocking of the actor, the wife, Weigel, who was doing the character of Mother Courage, and so that he just said that you should not bring it that emotion, so that the audience should not be driven by that emotion, rather than they should watch it as a at a distance, so that they can think over it and ponder over it.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Rohit. I think, what you've managed to say in 3 minutes, it's the topic for a whole bigger lecture. You've brought in, I was looking for one word, Doctor. It was like the word empathy. Okay, but you spoke of depersonalization, you spoke of Brechtian theater, you've spoken of the drive, driven, how audiences instinctively feel something as opposed to what they are made to feel. So thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Rohit. So to unpack all that on a basic terminology level, we are looking at the word empathy. Empathy is something that exists in the story. Whether the director intends it or whether we want to see it, every story is empathetic. Even if it's a story about one robot talking to another robot, there is innate empathy in it. This is my finding. Empathy is unavoidable. It is there already. It is hidden. It is shrouded. But how that empathy comes out of a performance, that is how the director, the actor, or the team works on. Okay. So emotional impact, what I have found, if it comes at the end, or if it comes in the middle section where we think that, okay, this is almost ending, then it perfectly functions as an interlude. Emotional impact as an interval or an interlude or an ending. That puts the whole thing into perspective. Otherwise, what happens is if we feel and read theater exclusively on emotion alone, that theatrical story can be summarized by that emotion. To give you an example, if I'm watching a play where there is a death, it's a funeral story, and there are people gathering in this funeral service, and they're all talking about the deceased, they're sharing it all. It's a play that is supposed to be sad. It's a play about the person who died. It's a play about how the relatives are coping with it. And that's it. That is all the play will be. That play is not going to evolve. Even in our conversations, it's going to stay the same in terms of content. In terms of executions, depending on how the director and the actors envision it, it's not going to, it's going to die in its own medium, no pun intended, because what it wants to do, it does exactly that. It doesn't evolve further. Because it is based on emotion. Because if we rely on this genre trope that the audience should feel a certain way after the play is done emotionally, then that play is going to be just that. It's going to be a play that can be summarized easily in one sentence rather than experienced. This is precisely why we have something called depersonalization, which is common to, as Dr. Rohit has clearly pointed out, perfectly pointed out, Brechtian theater devoted by Bertolt Brecht. He says the more distance you keep, if it's a funeral scene, I have to view it from a distance. I have to see it in such a way that it is not affecting me. And the characters have to see it in such a way that I'm not putting too much emotion in this. Because if I put too much emotion, then the audience will be carried away in that emotion. And after that, that'll be it. So this is one important element. How important is emotion? And how important is empathy in the stories that you're trying to say? Next slide, please. Yes, can we have the next slide, please? So this is once again, to summarize what I earlier said, dialogue is always a secondary option. And the word that we avoid like the plague for this one is the word exposition. I really do not like this word. Can anyone tell me what exposition is according to you? Anybody? What is
The
exposition?
disclosure of the mystery.
Okay, thank you for that, Shashank, but that is a more broader term. We are not going to focus on that. Okay. Anything else? But thank you, though. Thank you so much. Exposition. Simplest. What does exposition mean? I think people are Googling right now as we speak.
More like
Anybody?
description.
Descriptions,
Describing,
correct.
like initially, if you show that a character is, say, extremely crazy or something, but then later in the story, you actually get to know the reason for that craziness.
Oh,
Exposition, like
fair point.
discovering or exploring more.
Fair point. Thank you, Mr. Pitcher. So exposition is basically something that happens in the beginning of a story, in how you build the world. Okay. You have characters saying, let's just say two characters sitting in a ship. They say, we're sitting in a ship. We are out on the water. We're stranded. There is no help coming. We're two survivors. That is exposition. Okay. So exposition is an element of information across media that happens at the beginning of a story, which sets the world up and establishes the world. This is important. Expositions establish. I'm going to say it again. Expositions establish. So my goal when it comes to making theater is establish and justify. Okay. Establish and justify. How you justify what you establish, the story, the characters, the world, that is how you would direct the story. That is how you would discuss with your team. Establish and justify. What exposition does is it makes things easier. What you basically have is people talking to each other or one person talking to the audience. So I'm not saying that every time when an actor performs a soliloquy, that is exposition. It is a form of exposition. By that logic, I stand doomed when it comes to every theater maker and playwright before me. Shakespeare is going to severely criticize this thing. How can people not use exposition to create emotional impact across the audiences worldwide? Isn't that the whole point of theater, you might ask? I say, as a theater maker, when you're making your story, you need to think in terms of an event and how the event can be portrayed in light, shadow, music, and movement, and then think of how the character can speak. Exposition is a secondary practice, just like dialogue. We have another word called subtext, which is something anyone who's interested in actor training and Stanislavski and method acting, they might know this word. A subtext is something that you as a character, as an actor only knows, which the audience doesn't need to know. So exposition is subtext made plain so that everyone knows what is happening and you are saying it. So I'm countering the element of saying it. Okay. Any comments to add? Does anyone need to like say something to this? Okay. If not, next slide, please. Now we are going to talk of the brave cinematographers who have captured these images for your and mine viewing pleasure. The theater needs to evolve with the camera. It needs to evolve with the changing times. There is a saying that theater has been dying for so long, it has been kept on life support. It just never gives up. It always comes back in new format. What you're watching is, I wouldn't want to call it a play. It is what we call a remix of a famous movie called Night of the Living Dead. It is done by a theater company. Again, I've watched this play and I've spoken to the makers behind it. If you look at the top left portion of the screen, okay, where the three characters are standing, okay, that is a movie called Night of the Living Dead, released in 1968, I believe. I need to look that up, okay, by George Romero. So what these people do is they actually reenact the movie on stage, frame by frame. Okay. Top right, you see an actor who is on stage at the very center. Okay. And bottom left, you can see two cameramen, cinematographers, who capture the actor on stage, who is then projected up top. So what the cinematographers capture, the actor who is captured on stage, he's also in the movie, which is there on top left. So at the same time, a movie is projected and the same movie is replicated on stage. A movie is projected and the same movie is replicated on stage, and the cinematographers, the camera people, they are also actors in the play and they're replicating it. So it's like we're watching two movies at the same time. This quite innovative. Initially, I was not a fan of this. Like many critics, I would say, what is the point? What are they trying to do? Sounds too intellectual. I mean, what is it that they're trying to do? But then something about duration and spatiality. People who love to study how time works in theater, how space changes in theater. For them, this was like hitting the jackpot. Anybody else wants to add to this? If you can see what is going on stage in this picture. Anybody? So I've written that if it can be framed from the center, you have the most effective theatrical mode of storytelling. Because at the end of the day, we need to document resources such as this. And most photography follows the basic theatrical rule of plotting. The center is where the most interesting event happens. People in the sidelines, they fill up the space. You have to obliterate emptiness. These are all basic principles of photography. Okay. So if you can capture what happens on stage theatrically from the center, then you have something that lives across all media. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on this? Yeah, this one can be a bit dense because I believe I'm introducing so many genre experiments in one go. This can be a bit hard, I can imagine, but I welcome any comments, any doubts, any clarifications, so we can take it up right now before we move to the next slide.
Um, there is so many things going on here. If I
Yes.
say, the attention completely goes to the center figure who is sitting in this
Okay.
middle because it is exposed to him. The other characters are like a shadow. A complete attention falls on the center character.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Ashik. Another thing is the audience usually it sweeps them whole. It's not like one character is talking. Certain points the movie is muted. Certain points the characters on stage are muted, and the dialogue from the movie opens up. So it's almost like before TikTok was even invented. They had these practices on stage, on screen. Can we go for the previous slide, please? Once again, that's another picture I wanted to show. From the same production. Okay, you can see how the action is divided, bisected, transmitted from the camera on the stage. So now we come to the main foundation. We're nearing the end of our talk as well. Composition. This is what I adhere to. Compose your story. Starting, middle, end. Very simple, but let's not do that. Starting, ending which reaches the middle, prologue before the middle. After the middle, what happens? Leading to the ending, events before that, and then the ending. And even after the ending, you have something called a coda, which is that small bit of post-credit scene that Marvel Films is known to do. There's a term for that, coda. So if you get all these elements in one go, in rhythm, in flow, in cohesion, then you have what you call a composition. So a play world, as I've written here, is a term from viewpoints and compositions. It's a terminology in theater training. It basically shows that there are layers in terms of time and in terms of space to the productions that you do. Another thing that highlights in this frame, can anyone highlight that to me? There's something that stands out here, very important. You don't volunteer to tell me what it is? Something stands out in this frame. It is there right in front of your eyes, and it is creating something. It is not quite all right, but not quite bad either. It's right in front of your face. Can anyone point it out to me? Anybody? Well, if you can hear me, right?
Yes, you're audible, Ivan.
Yeah. It's a word that starts in C.
Camera.
Not quite. Okay. It is color.
Is it color?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So your emotion is affected by the color on stage. I'm going to repeat that once again. The color of the play will determine how you emotionally react to it. It's a different story for another day. There are different rules for lighting when it comes to stage. Different colors mean different things. Color theory and the color spectrum will shed more light on it. So with the rhythm, how the characters move, how the characters talk, how the characters dynamically interact, that creates the flow. Everything just goes about in its own place. Everything has a transition. Everything starts, everything ends. This creates cohesion. where there are parts to it that merge from one to another, and this defines the play. This is what we call a composition. Okay, so compose your story. Don't just merely, okay, now the actor has to say his lines, go. The second actor has to come, okay, next one, go. Nothing like that. And composition works on many levels. It can work verbally. It can work in terms of position. It can work in terms of music. It can even work for physical theaters where you don't even have dialogue. Okay, next slide. Again, this point we've already covered. Think in terms of light and shadow. This is how you devise the starting points of a story which happens on set. When you think in terms of light and shadow, you're also thinking cinematically, which is a conversation for another day. Filmmakers borrow elements and terminology from the theater to execute their stories. And remember, different stage positions denote different levels of intensity. It's not always the action should happen center stage. You can also, if you are really creative, can take the action from the center and relegate it to the side and execute it. But it has to have some intensity to it. That is it. Next slide, please. Now, once again, to summarize all the things that we've been speaking so far, don't talk to us, don't show us, but let us experience it. How do we experience it? Visually, through compositions. Visual devising is the first step. Design and dialogue. What happens on stage visually and how the characters interact with what happens on stage visually. It should have perfect harmony. This is what defines the experience because every visual experience is constructed by the eyes. There is a dialogue that says that it is the mind that sees, but not the eyes. Science has proven it wrong. Science has proven the great Sherlock Holmes wrong because it's the eyes that construct the visual world into phenomena. It's a major play of the senses. This is precisely why we need to visually devise a theatrical story as the most primary element before thinking of dialogue as the secondary element. On to the last slide, please. This is my personal message to each and every one of you here. And what you see is the stage from the very first slide, the ending shot, where the main character says goodbye to the audience by coming to the front of the ramp. And what you see are the audiences sitting in the dark, looking at the visual spectacle in front of them, creating their own meanings. What you see at the far right is the orchestra playing live music, rendering something old-fashioned into something that is new and technologically marvelous. And right at the center, you see a blue silhouette that is highlighted, highlighting the audience, highlighting the experience that is theater. Okay. On this note, we end this session and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Should I stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we can have questions now, if any.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. And so many new, innovative things that you showed in the layer, especially the color that shows the character, which when we present on stage, it's very, very true. Because most of the stage, the light effect is very difficult to manage. And that probably takes away the expressions and the whole scenario that the play wants to represent. So thank you so much, Dr. Yvonne, and I look forward to your contributions to our theater and to our play structures. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Can I leave now? I have to go for another meeting, Dr. Ayushi.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining and thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much,
contributing.
all the participants. This was a wonderful session, and I am so grateful that you took off your time, because new interpretations of youngsters such as you are of great value. So thank you. And thank you, the uh, guest speakers and Pratiksha. Looking forward to having you on our campus sometime. So bye-bye and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ivan. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed the talk. And you had shared a few things with me as I was the host, but still, I looked forward to it. And I look forward to more enriching sessions like these. We'll plan out a few more. We have Dr. Rohit in the meeting. He is the Dramatics Club president over here. He's a faculty member over here. He's also one of the founding members of Mimesis at Amity School of Languages. And I'm glad that you interacted with him. Definitely, we should try to have a podcast between you two if it's possible in future. Could be quite enriching, like I told you earlier. So Dr. Uday is not here right now, but both of you would have a good conversation with Ivan, I'm sure. So any questions, anybody, you can raise your hands, or you can simply chip in just like that. You don't need to even raise your hands. Anyone, any observations, anything? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ayushi ma'am. Thank you. It was a pleasure listening to you. And right now I'm on my way because we have rehearsal scheduled at 10:15.
I
But I
know,
was
I know.
listening to you while I was driving. But yes, surely we will find out time and we will have more interaction. There's a lot to talk about theater and how theater in Europe is quite different from what we are doing here in India. And yes, it's a visual medium, but then in India, resource and budget is also a very big problem for doing theater. And so the kind of experimental theater which is happening in Europe, in India, it's more about actors and actor-driven theater because again, lack of resources and lack of budget. Even the theater which we are doing at campus is very restrictive because even we don't have the permission to move the lights which are available in the auditorium. So so that creates a lot of hurdles. So we do theater in restrictive form. And India as is an argumentative in nature, as we all call that Indian people are very argumentative. So dialogue becomes, I think, very prominent part of Indian theater. But yes, visual it is, and visuals are something which are very important in theatrical notion. So thank you. We will have a discussion. We'll talk about. I can share my experiences. I will love to have your experiences. I'll try to incorporate those experiences in my work and what I am doing here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Of course, looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining and giving us these things. Arya, would you like to ask something? Arya is the coordinator of Mimesis currently, and she's also into theater. There are a lot of students who are from, the theater society that we have currently, Mimesis. So they might have questions. The questions need not be restricted to what Ivan has shared in this presentation. You might ask questions related to direction, acting as well, if you want. We'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, sir. Sir, it was a wonderful
Wow.
session, and thank you for giving us your precious time. Sir, as Rohit sir told that we are preparing for a production. So there was this question that what challenges do actors face while preparing for a contemporary versus or classical play? Like, what are the differences between these two?
Okay, so thank you so much, Arya. Name is Arya, correct? I'm saying it right?
Yes, sir.
Hi. So thank you for raising that question, Arya. It's a big question, first of all. There are so many layers and elements to it to uncover separately. But just to summarize in one sentence, number one would be vocal training. Okay. For classical performances, the sound is the most primary important thing. So extensive vocal training methods is the main number one thing when it comes to classical training. Contemporary training can benefit from good vocal challenges. I'm not saying vocal exercises, that's a different thing. That's a startup, it's a warm-up. I'm talking about how the classical training was undergone in terms of vocality. That is the first challenge. So the only advice that my elders have given me, voice artists and everything, is I would not recommend it. Yell at the top of your voice 3 times a day. Break your voice. What happens after that? Your voice becomes more bass. Okay. For people who are working in the gaming sector as voiceover artists, for them, this is the golden advice. But in theater, I would so wholeheartedly not recommend it. Number 2, you have to make sure that the greatest challenge is to relax. Okay, to relax your facial muscles. Like I've kind of given up acting because something happened to me 5 years back that kind of affected my left portion. You can see one eye is shorter than the other. Okay, because this skin has folded over. So for me, if I'm acting, I have to maintain a relaxed face, which is not my natural face. Okay, so it's like this is a natural face to you, a relaxed face, because your cheek is bare, your brow is unfurrowed, and that leads to neutrality. So number 1, vocal training. Number 2, relaxed states of being. Number 3, learn to start with neutral expressions, which is opposed to blank expressions. Blank expressions, we don't want that. So contemporary training and classical training have these 3 things in common. How the intensity comes about, that is based on the training you might receive in your group. Okay. Voice, relaxed states of being on your face, on your body, on your limbs, on your gestures. Third, neutrality. These might help. Thank you, Radha.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? I think Kuber is also here, but he was traveling.
Yes, ma'am.
Trishtika. Yes,
Ma'am,
Trishtika, please go ahead.
am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes,
Kuber, you're audible.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Good morning.
good morning.
Sir, I'm a aspirant and newly actor in theatre, and Rohit sir is training me. So I'm
Okay.
curious about a question for acting. So if you are interested in cricket, sir, so I think film acting is like ODI and T20, and theatre is like Test
Mhm.
cricket, because there are cuts and breaks and many visual effects in film as compared to theater. But in theater acting, we as an actor has to remain in character for continuous hours. What do you think is more important and tough for an actor? Film acting or theater acting? Or what is more important for practicing and for being an actor?
Okay. So thank you for that
Because
question,
I'm into
Kuber.
both. I'm into both.
Okay.
I love both.
Very good. Very good. And I hope you make it big out there because we need like new interpretations and new experiments. So all the best on your journey. Now, to answer your question, there are 2 answers to that. One is the ideal answer and one is the realistic answer. The ideal answer would be theatrical acting would be better, acting on stage, because when you act in front of crowds, you're much more confident when you act for the camera. Okay? If you have to act in a big set with so many people looking at you, you won't be as nervous as that. Number 3, the most important thing, what I mentioned earlier with Arya, vocal. Theater actors have a better command of their vocal language, okay, as opposed to film actors, which is a different thing. So the ideal answer would be theatrical acting is the superior one. Now, the realistic answer, number 1, what I say is, unfortunately, nobody cares. Unfortunately, and I'll tell you why. You waste your time or you utilize your time with vocal training. You come prepared, go on set, you give your best performance, and the random techie who works for the production controller, who works for the AD, who works with the director says, "Sir, please come to location tomorrow, post effects. Bye." So what was that hard work that I just did? All the vocal training gone for a toss because the director has decided to add post effects. So now I'll just have to come to the studio and redo the whole thing again. Second thing, I say film acting is not so much about the talent as much about the endurance. Only enter film acting if you have endurance. The great filmmakers out there go for minimum 22 takes. I remember working on a production. So all I had to do was walk across a camera, open the door, peer inside, look like this, and cut. Minimum of 23 takes were taken for that shot. Minimum. Okay. By the end, I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Tell me what it is you want. I'll do just that. Okay. Actors reach this state. Okay. Now, my solution to this is automatic acting, automaton, robotic. They say automatons strip an actor of emotion, but we can bend the rules a bit. If I have to open a door, look two sides, and feel an emotion within, I have to maintain myself in that state. I cannot give my best emotion on the first take, but I have to learn to hold it in. So when you learn to hold an emotion in, your body adapts. It almost becomes like muscle memory when you're driving a car. So this is the advanced stage of acting. When you are aware that you're acting in front of the camera, but you're not emotionally invested in it, but you can maintain a distance. And that comes with practice. So to answer your question, Kuber, if you're going to be a film actor, make sure to keep the endurance meter high and never give your best shot on the first take. By the third take, most people will be on tears saying, I can't do this. And we've all been there. Okay. Theatrical acting is the far superior acting when it comes to the structure. It will help you gain so many other skills. So I say there is no better version for theater and movies. Both present its own challenges. Find out that which you are good at and then break the rules. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful answer. Can I ask you
hope it
one more question?
Can we, Dr. Ashish, do we have the time?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
we have time?
Yeah, yeah. We do.
Please do.
Hello.
Go ahead, Kubir. Please do.
Sir, does theater make each of us more sensitive person and a person who understand other more? Because we understand different perspective in writing, directing, and acting too. My feeling is that we turn into more understanding and sensitive person. What do you
Okay,
think about this?
that's a good question, Kuber. I can answer with something that is positive. It shows that you have a high empathy meter, Kuber. Keep it up. We need more people like you. And theater necessarily, I think theater starts the process. Okay. Because again, this is an important thing I wanted to say. I've had the same conversation with Dr. Aishi. There's something called a life cycle theory, which says that at certain stages of your life, a bit more of you develops, a bit more of you goes back. So there is this, to sum it up, at the ages of 20 to 30, it's called the intimacy versus isolation stage. Most of you here realize, are we meant to have relationships? Are we meant to be loners? Are we meant to do great things or like do small things with greatness? So this happens at this stage. So taking the same principle, a 20-year-old student who has been watching theater for 7, 8 years, ever since they were like way too young, will have more theatrical knowledge and more empathy than a 50-year-old man or woman who has never watched a movie in their life. But that does not mean that that is empathy in itself. That is narrative empathy, stories. In real life, it may not be the case, but when it comes to cinema, someone who is way younger might have more knowledge and more empathy because they consume a lot of movies and stories rather than someone who is older who doesn't consume stories. But what I say, in agreeing with a little bit of what you said to that, theater starts the process, it initiates the journey, but people become more empathetic as they grow old. Okay. I can vouch for this bit, scenes that never made me cry 10 years back. Now I'm watching it and I'm like, emotional. I don't know why, but it's emotional. So there you go. I hope that answers your question.
Srishtika, we have a question from you. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. My name is
Good
Shrashtika,
morning. Good morning.
and good morning, sir. And I really liked the session. It was really knowledgeable. I learned a lot of new things, and I
Thank
really
you.
liked the way you spoke. It was like very nice. And my question, I don't know, is actually, I mean, is it very relevant or not? But my question is,
Yes.
um, if there was a movie and the same plot had to be turned into a theater performance, do you think they had to, make a change in a little, little bit of plot? Because you know how in a movie we have everything we have want to imagine, and all we think about is what would I do if I was in that place. But when it comes to theater, we imagine things. We have more of an imaginary aspect instead of setting up, a very grand setting. So my question is, do you think they should change the a little bit of plot, or they shouldn't?
So to answer your question, Shrishtika, thank you for bringing this up. You are basically entering the adaptation territory. How do you adapt things across movies, across theater? So to get one thing correct, you're talking exclusively about movies turning into theater. That's correct, right? That's what your question
Yes, sir.
was? Okay. So when
Yes,
you're
sir.
making a movie, you have much more freedom. Okay. But when you're making a theatrical stage, you have to tell your story across certain restrictions. Okay, so to answer your question, primarily, plot changes usually are a bad idea. Usually, okay. An example I can give is Frankenstein, which is basically a novel made into so many movies. And then, if you've watched the movie Slumdog Millionaire, Danny Boyle, directed by Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle was primarily a theater maker. In 2017, he made a production of that, of Frankenstein, with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Miller, two actors. So we have two people who played Sherlock Holmes, acting as Frankenstein and his monster. And what is interesting about this production, and Srishtika, this is very important, this will answer your question. The story is the same, okay, about the Frankenstein and his beast who he creates from a dead person. The roles will be interchanged every day. So one day, if Benedict Cumberbatch is playing Frankenstein and Johnny Miller is playing the monster, the next day, Johnny plays Frankenstein and Ben plays the monster. So we have the hero becoming the villain and the villain becoming the hero every single day consecutively. Okay, that way they didn't change the plot, but they changed the execution. Okay. If you're talking about Broadway productions of certain movies like Lord of the Rings, we are talking about certain movies like Harry Potter, of course, we cannot show the entire thing. Their necessary plot cuts have to be made. So to adapt, ultimately, it is the effectiveness of the team with which you're working. But what is not acceptable is to add new scenes or to cut crucial elements of a play just so as to, make it easy to watch. That is not at all acceptable. Okay, does this answer your question, Srishti?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Srishti. Yes, we have Shashank raised his hand.
Yes, sir. I have one question, sir. It's
Yes.
very relevant to today's time. That how we are going to prevent theater from becoming an academic and elitist activity and bringing it down to the general audience, sir. This is a very pertinent question, and after visiting so many theaters, watching so many plays, I feel that theater is still an academic activity, and only a certain section of people, visit theater to watch a play. Now, the other thing is that what I feel that it is receiving stiff competition from cinema. So those who are not interested in like academic or not pursuing research in drama or not interested in theater, they would usually go for cinema, right? So how we are going to do that? What is the roadmap for this century theater?
Okay, that's a very important question, Shashank. Thank you for bringing that up. So to answer, I would say theater has always been at odds with cinema. Not just cinema, theater has always been at odds with communication practices. Before the first book was printed, the Gutenberg Bible, theater was commonly a stage show that was manipulated by the people in power to almost brainwash the lower classes in terms of heaven and hell and religion, modes of good and bad. It was all a morality experiment. After books came to be, people realized there are other modes of consuming information. After that, we have like latest the daguerreotype photograph, which basically showed that, you can see people beyond the stage, see people who don't evolve, they're just standing there. And after that, the camera was invented, and people who were making the first movies borrowed a lot from theater. So there's this constant competition between evolving technological practices and communication practices in theater. So gradually, as you can expect, theater started losing its demand. So to bring it back, number one thing that we have to do is university curriculum. We need to have people studying theater history in university curriculum. Number two, we need people experimenting with folk theater. I don't want to use the word marginalized here because there are a lot of theater practices across rural India that are still up and alive and very much so way better design oriented than all the latest technology can provide. So we need to get more into explorations and studying on a university level folk theaters all across the world. Just like we have a syllabus called world literature, we need a syllabus that strengthens the folk theater of our country and of countries in every part of the world. After we get that, we will then see the similarities and the varying points. That will help us study this better. Number three, we need to have a practical based examination where people evaluate performances. This is something that I strictly wants the Indian curriculum to change. Rather than writing essays based on theater, I want them to evaluate performances based on the two things that I've mentioned above. Number one, theatrical curriculum that looks at theater history. Number two, folk exposure, rural theater exposure. Number three, practical exploration through performance, imbibing all the elements. Then we have a fighting chance for the next generation. Because this generation will be dabbling in technology, will be dabbling in content. Theater has a hard fight against this. So I hope that answers your question, Shashank.
Yes, sir, that answers my questions fairly. But I feel the problem is that integrating the academia and the performance is very necessary. And that's where we are lagging. Right. I am a researcher in theater and drama. And, if I want, then I can get the practical exposure, like visiting theater and all. But as to put forward that I don't engage in theater much. So it's true with several colleges and universities that academia there is only the drama has been taught. Then you go with critical analysis with little emphasis on performative aspects, right? So that is what happening. So I feel that integrating these two fields are very necessary, right? So that's all from my side. And thank you.
Sorry,
Thanks a
Shashank, I
lot for
lost you
answering my
for a bit.
question.
Can you repeat the last sentence? Oh, okay, sure, Shashank. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Dr. Arshi? Are we doing on time?
Yeah, we can still take up a few more if you are fine with it.
We can. I'm fine.
Okay. So I
Yes,
think Ms. Alpha has a question. Yes, please go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have a question, but I want to say that I am a theater artist and I'm also working on drama pedagogy as my PhD topic. And you talked about this evaluation of performance. So I'm working on that and I will require your input. So can I get your mail ID?
Yes, Dr. Aishi, you know what to do. Absolutely, it will be my glad to help you.
I
Though
have
I do
added
have
you
to
to the
warn you,
group.
Ms. Alpha, there are better people who are way better at this than I am, but I will do my best to help.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your consideration. Thank you so much.
In the WhatsApp group that was created for this guest lecture, we will share the email ID of the speaker, Mr. Ivan, and we'll also share a list of resources. I think that will be helpful. Any more questions or observations?
Ma'am, I'm
Just
not
a
a part
general.
of this WhatsApp group, ma'am. Yeah, sorry.
No, please, sir, please.
Yeah, I'm not a part of this WhatsApp group that has been created. So I had to ask for the link again because I haven't received any till yesterday or till
Okay, so
today.
please email us, Mr. Shashank. Is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, please email us if you have our email ID, or you can simply like drop a message on WhatsApp. We'll try to connect with you as a. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
So thank you all the participants for joining. We really had a good time. I hope you did too. And there are a lot of participants from outside Amity, so we would invite you for future guest lectures. And I floated a feedback form in the WhatsApp group. I will also get it emailed to you. Please fill it up for us. It'll help us plan better events in future. And we also need inputs from you on what particular areas you want to be talked upon. Okay. So thank you so much. Ivan, should we close this now?
Yes, we can. No other questions, right, from anyone?
Yeah, no more hands have been raised. Anybody who still has a question, you can go ahead.
No.
Anyone?
So I
Last
think
call.
last one.
Okay. Flight is
All
about to
right.
leave now. Fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ivan.
Each and every one of
End the
you.
meeting.
Thank you so much. Stay blessed.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.